An opinion drafted by the Department of Justice now argues that service members who participate in boat strikes in the Caribbean cannot be prosecuted. So this all comes as Pentagon officials say the military has ordered its 20th lethal strike against an alleged drug trafficking boat this week, killing 4 narco-terrorists in the Caribbean Sea. Right now, more than 70 people have been killed in these attacks so far, even as many now question the legality of these strikes. Let's bring in now Chief Legal Analyst Clive Rhodes to this conversation. The first question I have for you is what legal authority is there that the U.S. has to be able to treat these Caribbean strikes as part of an armed conflict?
The Constitution. You're going to Article 2. That's what anyone that's been around the president is saying. That's what the president himself is saying, that I have the authority as the commander-in-chief to order these strikes because I control the military. Because I do that, and this is not a war, I don't have to go to Congress. I can make these actions if I do a couple of things. Do they comply with international law? Do they comply with maritime rules? Is it necessary and proportionate? And do they violate another country's sovereignty without their consent? Well, they've checked all those boxes. They're speaking to other countries. They're doing this in open water. And so right now, because it's not a war, because he's not, putting troops on the ground, that's typically what we would consider some type of military action leaning towards a war. He's saying, I have 100% authority to do this, and he's challenging anyone to try to stop him. On the other side, folks are saying, well, you're using the same things you're using in Afghanistan. You're calling these folks enemy combatants. These are enemy KIAs. If you're saying that, what war are we in? Because typically when there's an enemy killed in action, the other enemy would be someone we're having war against. The Trump administration's come back and say the enemy are the terrorist organizations. The enemies are the gangs that in the cartels that are bringing drugs into this country. So
that's where I have to question you there, because you talk about terrorists, people who are bringing drugs into the country, but there also could be some civilians that could possibly be on these boats. So my big question for you is, does the DOJ opinion essentially shield these service members then from liability if civilians were wrongly targeted?
I don't think the opinion shields it, because that's all it is. It's an opinion. They're giving their advice, their guidance to what they think should happen and what happened if this thing played out and someone attempted to take them to court. But on the other side of that, I don't think that the opinion would stop it, but I do think if an officer, some military person, is following a valid legal authorized order and they are acting inside of their scope, it would be hard for some type of claim to be brought against them. And then you'd say, where would the claim be brought? Would it be brought in the United States? Would it be brought in another country? Depending on where they are in the water, that's where the claim would have to be brought in terms of civil and or criminal action. But I do think it will be limited, not on this opinion, because that's just guidance, that's not law, but it would be based on them being military officers and military members following a validly given order. And that's the part you have to say, are these valid orders?
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, in terms of what the order is, how can troops tell if an order to carry out a strike is lawful, and then who's accountable if it isn't?
Yeah, that I think is the biggest thing. When you're looking at lawfulness, it's did they comply and rely on the rules of engagement? Were they targeting and picking civilians? What was the intelligence gathered? And they're not doing this all at the same time, so they're not, doing a thorough investigation, but the standard is pretty clear. Have I done something that is outside the normal scope for what should be done reasonably in this situation? And so they're not saying you have to do a deep investigation, but you need to make sure that, do you have me killing civilians? Am I standing in the middle of the street and shooting down people that aren't attempting to kill or attack us? I think the clearest example I can look at is Vietnam War. There's a situation with Officer Thompson that you hear about a lot where they were telling him to shoot civilians. And he was flying a helicopter, landed the helicopter, and didn't want that to go forward because he felt like that was an order that he could not do, that he thought this was an unlawful order and I'm not going to continue to do it. One case that they point to a number of times where a military official has disregarded a unlawful order and said, I will not do it.
Clive Rhodes, we appreciate your insight. As always, thanks.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.